The nameless Christian woman shared her last water. The feared JARL claimed her as his own. Desolate, merciless, the marsh clawed at Ilara's boots, icy waters seeping through worn leather. Wessex felt like a dream, a lost shore. Here, only the reek of decay and the ghosts that walked with her. Ghosts of smoke, screams, the sickening thud of axes splitting wood and bone. He took everything. Village burned, family butchered before her eyes. Vengeance was a cold, hard knot in her gut, a promise whispered to the wind that whipped across the fens. And there, tangled in reeds like a broken carrion bird, lay him, Thorgest, the raven, not the feared JARL of sagas, a bleeding husk, breath ragged, eyes glazed with agony, her destroyer, the killer of her kin. Vengeance roared in Ilara's veins, a berserker's rage. But another voice, a gentle whisper, learned in the quiet hours of prayer. Mercy. To him, her hand trembled. Her skin felt alien, reaching. The small water skin, her last hope in this God's forsaken place, tilted. A single, precious stream. A guttural sound from the dying man. Life, clinging to a thread finer than spider silk. She had shown mercy. To the Raven. Antes de continuarmos com essa história incrível, preciso te fazer um alerta importante. Muitos inscritos têm relatado que o YouTube removeu suas inscrições sem aviso. Dá só uma conferida rápida no botão vermelho aí embaixo para garantir que você ainda está inscrito no canal. Não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo que vem por aí. E já que você está aí, deixa aquele like poderoso que me ajuda muito com o algoritmo. E me conta nos comentários de qual cidade você está assistindo. Adoro conhecer cada pessoa incrível que faz parte dessa comunidade. Sua participação faz toda a diferença. Vamos interagir. He lived, defying the bog, defying death itself, and in his eyes, as strength slowly returned, was not gratitude, something else, ownership. He watched her with a hawk's intensity. The air thickened with unspoken challenge. You are mine now, Thorgest rasped, voice like gravel dragged over stone. Mine. The woman who offered water to the man who killed her kin. A claim that spat in the face of their blood laws, spitting defiance at tradition and his own brother Einar's ambition. A bizarre pact, forged in mud and blood. Not love, not loyalty. Survival. A shield against the storm he knew was coming. Ilara, anchored to her destroyer by a single act of defiant faith. They moved north, the marsh giving way to harder ground, scrub pine replacing reeds. The wind howled a warning through the branches. Then, hoofbeats. Not the wind. Hard. Fast. Through the trees iron gleamed. Einar's banner. His riders. Their eyes fixed on Thorgest. And the Anglo-Saxon woman beside him. And the Anglo-Saxon woman beside him. The wind died. A sudden, heavy silence fell, thick as the bog they'd left behind. Iron rang. Hooves churned the soft ground at the edge of the scrub. Einar's banner, the serpent coiled tight, snapped in a sudden gust that ripped through the quiet. Riders, 20, maybe more, hard faces scarred and grim, eyes like chips of flint fixed on Thorgest. Not just challenge in those stares. Hunger, the scent of weakness, of blood on the air. Thorgest straightened, a tremor running through him, the raw wound in his side a burning brand. He was weak, yes, but the Jarl's pride, the raven's defiance, coiled in his gut. He wouldn't yield. Not here, not now, not to his brother. Ilara stood frozen, a deer caught in the forest fire. The riders flowed around Einar, flanking him like wolves surrounding the Alpha. Their gazes flicked to her, the foreign woman beside the Jarl. Confusion furrowed brows. Curiosity, sharp and cold. Judgment, Rune 7. Then Einar pulled his horse to a halt, the beast snorting steam into the crisp air. His helm was pushed back, revealing a face carved from granite, hard and unforgiving. His eyes, gray as a winter sea, locked on to Thorgest. Brother, Einar's voice cut like a honed axe. You live. A shame the bog was not hungry enough. Rune 8:12. He didn't glance at Ilara. She was nothing. A shadow, a conquest, a thing. But then, among the riders, just behind Einar's right shoulder, a movement, a face, not one of the usual hardened warriors. This one, scarred, deep, angry slashes across one cheek, pulling the corner of his mouth into a permanent snarl. His hair was matted, dull, but his eyes, God help her, those eyes. A gasped breath tore from Ilara's throat, raw and tearing. Rune 1:9. The world tilted. The wind howled, but the sound was distant, muffled by the sudden roaring in her ears. It couldn't be. No. She saw him fall. Saw the blood stain the thatch of their home. Saw the axe rise, fall. Saw his body crumple like a broken doll. He was dead, gone, smoke and ash and memory. But there, standing among the men who served her family's killer's brother, lean, hard, changed, the same stubborn set to his jaw, the same unusual green flecks in the hazel of his eyes. Alfred, her brother. Rune 3:4. Alive. His gaze wasn't on Thorgest. It was on her, cold, filled with a profound, sickening betrayal that struck her harder than any Viking blade. His mouth, twisted by the scars, opened. Ilara, he said, his voice a dry rustle of leaves. No warmth, no recognition of the sister he'd fought beside, prayed with, laughed with. Only that chilling accusation. You saved him. Rune 8. He pointed a hand, missing 2 fingers, towards Thorgest. The raven, the butcher. His eyes flicked back to Ilara, burning with a hatred she had never seen. Not even from the Northmen who ravaged her village. You gave him water. You kept the killer alive. A choked, bitter sound escaped him, almost a laugh, while our mother choked on smoke, while father's head was split like firewood, while little Mary, he trailed off, the name hanging in the air, a poisoned dart. Rune 9. Alfred stepped his horse forward, aligning himself not just with Einar, but seemingly for Einar, against Thorgest, against Ilara. I swore on their graves, Alfred rasped, his voice gaining strength. Hard as iron, forged anew. Vengeance on Thorgest, and on any who stand with him. His eyes, Ilara's brother's eyes, were now fixed solely on her. They promised no mercy, only reckoning Rune 1, 8, 12. The air crackled, not just with the rivalry of brothers, but with a horror Elara couldn't comprehend. Her mercy hadn't just saved her destroyer. It had resurrected a ghost to condemn her. Rune 10, brief moment of perceived hope turned devastating. And the Anglo-Saxon woman beside him. The world swam. Elara blinked, the wind howling like a banshee now, the sound rushing into her ears from within. It couldn't be. Alfred, standing there, alive. Her throat worked, a dry, terrible sound trapped inside. His face, yes, those were his eyes, the green flecks unmistakable, but twisted, set in a mask of accusation. The scars, she hadn't seen those before. Angry crimson slashes, pulling his cheek tight, making his mouth a permanent, cruel line. Her brother, not fallen in the fire, not butchered, here, with them, against her. Rune 1, 3, 4, 9. Einar watched, a flicker of cruel amusement in his gray eyes. He knew, or suspected, this wasn't just chance. Alfred's presence here with him meant something darker than mere survival. The riders shifted, their eyes darting between the siblings, the tension thick enough to choke on. Rune 7. Alfred stepped his horse closer, his gaze never leaving Elara's face. That hand, the one missing the fingers, it clenched around the reins. You stand with him, he rasped again, the sound like dry leaves skittering across frozen ground. With the raven. Rune 8, 12. Elara found her voice, a raw, broken whisper. Alfred, how are you here? I thought. A bitter, choked sound escaped Alfred, close to a laugh, devoid of any mirth. Thought I was dead? Like mother? Like father? Like little Mary? His eyes bored into her, burning with that alien hatred. Oh, I was meant to be, left for the ash and the dogs. He gestured vaguely at his scarred face with the maimed hand. A keepsake. Rune 9. He leaned forward, his voice dropping, low and venomous, cutting through the wind. This was the twist. This was the barb meant to pierce her soul. But I made sure I was found. When the reavers burst into the study, when father stood with his axe, and mother screamed, Alfred's voice broke, but recovered, hardened. I didn't fight. Not then. Not for them. Rune 8, 1. Elara's breath hitched. Her blood ran cold. I showed them the hidden passage, Alfred snarled, spitting the words like venom. His eyes were wild now, fixed on her horror. The one only father and I knew, the one that led under the old oak, the one mother and Mary were heading for. Rune 3, 9. He paused, letting the weight of it crash down on her. Elara swayed, the marsh smell suddenly overpowering, the taste of bile in her mouth. He hadn't just survived. He had bartered his survival. He had traded the lives of their mother and little sister for his own. Rune 1, 10. This was the crushing blow to any hope. They didn't escape through it, Alfred said, his voice flat now, horrifyingly calm. The Northmen were already there, waiting, because I showed them the way. He looked at Thorgest then, a quick, sharp glance. My price for living, a marked man, spared by the butcher's men because I gave them richer prey. Rune 8. He turned back to Alara, his gaze searing. So don't speak to me of mercy, he roared, his voice cracking. Don't speak to me of saving the raven. You saved the man who ordered the deaths I ensured. You kept the monster alive. The monster whose path to Mother and Mary I cleared. His scarred face contorted, not with grief, but with a twisted, self-justifying rage. And now I see you, with him. You are no sister. You are just another part of that night, a survivor who chose the wrong side, a traitor. Rune 1, 8, 12. Alfred raised his maimed hand, not towards Thorgest, but directly at her. My vengeance is sworn on their graves, Ilara. Every last one. Thorgest will die by my hand. And anyone who stands with him, anyone who aided his evil, they will burn in Odin's halls for eternity. Starting with you. Rune 8, 12. The wind died again, but the silence was louder than any storm. Ilara stared at her brother, the ghost she had longed for, now revealed as the architect of their ruin, a soul steeped in a betrayal colder and sharper than any steel. Thorgest watched them both, his eyes narrowed, the claim he had made on Ilara taking on a horrifying new dimension. She hadn't just saved her destroyer. She had allied herself, unknowingly, with his primary target, and alienated herself from the only family she had left, the brother who damned their own kin to survive, and now sought to damn her for a misplaced act of grace. The saga had just begun its darkest turn. The saga had just begun its darkest turn. Alfred's hand, the one missing fingers, remained raised, a trembling accusation pointed not at Thorgest, but at Ilara. Starting with you. The words hung in the frigid air, carved in ice. His eyes, Ilara's brother's eyes, promised only fire. Rune 1, 8, 12. Thorgest watched the man who claimed to be her brother, his own raw wound a dull throb compared to the sudden, sharp understanding coiling in his gut. Alfred spoke of betrayal, of vengeance, but his rage felt wild, undirected, a hammer striking air. Thorgest's gaze flicked past Alfred, past Einar, scanning the hard faces of the riders. Something felt wrong. A detail missed, a piece out of place from the chaos of that night. Rune 4, 7. Then he saw him, just behind Einar's left shoulder, partially obscured by the horse's head. A rider unlike the others, lean, still. His face a roadmap of old battles, crisscrossed with scars, but one stood out, a thin white line that ran from his temple down to the corner of his jaw, pulling his mouth into a permanent, chilling half-smile. His eyes, pale and cold as chips of glacial ice, met Thorgest's gaze across the space. Rune 3, 4. Recognition, cold and absolute, slammed into Thorgest. Skari. He was here. Thorgest had believed Skari dead, lost in the flames or the aftermath. Skari, who had served him loyally for years. Skari, who had vanished the night of the raid on the Anglo-Saxon village. Not just vanished, defected. Vanished with the knowledge of his warband's movements, his plans, and the layout of the village. Rune 8, 12. Thorgest's eyes narrowed. He remembered Skari that night. moving through the burning village. Remembered a brief, cold exchange. Remembered seeing Skari near the largest dwelling, the one with the study. Skari, the man who knew about hidden passages, who always had a network of informers, even among the Anglo-Saxons. Rune 3-4. A smirk touched Skari's scarred lips, a cold, knowing expression that didn't reach his dead eyes. He shifted slightly in his saddle. A subtle movement that drew Alfred's attention. A quick, almost imperceptible glance between the two men. Rune 4. Ilara, following Thorgest's rigid stare, saw the exchange. Saw the rider. Saw the scar, the eyes, the cold, terrible half-smile. Saw Alfred's fleeting acknowledgement of the man. The world tipped again, this time into an abyss of pure horror. Not just Alfred's betrayal, not just Thorgest's destruction. Something woven deeper, colder. Rune 1, 9, 10. The spark of hope, understanding, instantly extinguished by deeper horror. The skald's voice dropped, low as a death rattle. That rider, Skari, he wasn't just one of Einar's men now. He was there that night. He was the one Alfred showed the passage to. Not some anonymous Northman, not just the butcher's men. Alfred hadn't bargained with pawns. He had bargained with the serpent's tooth itself. Skari, Einar's viper in Thorgest's own ranks, the architect of treachery within treachery. Alfred, the grieving brother, was a blinded fool. A tool sharp with vengeance, but aimed at the wrong heart. Rune 5, 8, 12. Skari's gaze flicked from Alfred back to Ilara, lingering on her face, on her shock, on her newfound understanding. The smirk widened just a fraction. He was the one. He had taken her mother. He had taken her sister, not just through the violence of the raid, but through the calculated exploitation of her brother's terror. And he was here, watching, enjoying the spectacle of Alfred's misguided hatred tearing Ilara apart, all while standing under Einar's banner, secure in his new allegiance. Rune 1, 7, 9. Thorgest drew a ragged breath, the pain in his side forgotten, replaced by the icy fury of realization. This wasn't just Einar challenging him. This was a deeper rot. Skari's presence, Alfred's misplaced rage. It meant the raid, perhaps even his decisions that night, had been manipulated, poisoned from within. Einar hadn't just waited for Thorgest to fall. He had planted the seeds of his downfall in the very ground Thorgest walked, using men like Skari, using tragedies like Ilara's, using pawns like Alfred. Rune 8:12. Ilara felt the ground give way beneath her. Alfred hadn't just saved himself by sacrificing their family to the enemy. He had delivered them into the hands of a specific enemy, a snake in the grass who was now allied with his new master, Einar. Her vengeance, Alfred's vengeance, it was aimed at the wrong target, guided by a hand she never saw until this moment. The true monster wasn't just the JARL who burned her home. It was the cold-eyed man watching from behind Einar, the one who had twisted her brother's fear into a weapon, the one who held the leash on Alfred's hate. Alfred, the brother she mourned, a ghost returned to damn her. Skari, the serpent, pulling the strings of his vengeance. Thorgest, the destroyer, now bound to her by a mercy she instantly regretted. The air tasted of dust and betrayal. Alfred, his face a mask of scarred fury, leaned further forward on his horse. "You think this ends with words?" he rasped, his voice raw. "My oath is sworn, in blood, their blood." He gestured again with the maimed hand towards Thorgest, then swept it towards Alara. "He dies, and you watch." Rune 1, 8, 12. Einar shifted in his saddle, his gaze flicking between the enraged Saxon and his wounded brother, then settling, sharp and assessing, on Ilara. "Enough," he barked, the sound cutting through the tension. His eyes, gray as a storm, held a cruel curiosity. "Brother Thorgest, you cling to life, and you drag this thing from the bog with you. Explain yourself, before my patience wears thin." Rune 7, 8. Thorgest straightened slowly, ignoring the throbbing pain in his side, his eyes fixed, not on Einar, but on Skari. A cold, dangerous light flickered in the depths of the raven's gaze. He didn't speak, not yet. He was calculating, seeing the full board for the first time, the layers of treachery woven by the man with the glacial eyes. Rune 1, 4, 8. It was Skari who finally broke the silence. He nudged his horse forward slightly, a subtle movement that drew all eyes. His scarred face held that chilling half-smile, his pale eyes gleaming with malicious amusement. He spoke, not loudly, but his voice carried, smooth as oil over stone. "The Jarl needs no explanation, Einar," Skari said, his voice light, conversational. "He merely claimed what was his, what was always within his grasp, had he but known." Rune 5, 8, 12. He paused, letting the words hang. Alfred's head snapped towards him, confusion warring with rage. Einar's brows furrowed. Ilara felt a cold dread trickle down her spine. What was always within his grasp? Skari's gaze fixed on Ilara, and the smirk widened. "You speak of vengeance, little Saxon," he said, addressing Alfred. But his words were for her. "You rage because your sister saved the man who took your kin. You blame the raven, but the threads, they are older, more tangled than you know." Rune 1, he leaned back, his posture relaxed, but his eyes held hers, twin points of ice. "Did your father never speak of the blood in your mother's veins?" Skari asked, his voice soft, poisonous. Rune 9. Ilara felt the world tilt violently. "What? Her mother? The woman you called mother?" Skari continued, oblivious or uncaring of the effect of his words. "She was no true Saxon daughter of Wessex soil. She was born north of the sea. Her mother fled these lands generations ago, yes, but her blood, it remained of the raven's kin." Rune 1, 8, 12. He paused again, his eyes flicking to Thorgest, then back to Ilara, savoring the dawning horror on her face. "Your mother was of Thorgest's own lineage, Ilara," Skari stated flatly, the words dropping like stones into a frozen lake. "A branch long lost, but of the same tree. A bloodline Einar sought to claim, or perhaps silence, to strengthen his own hand." The raven, in his blind fury, reaped what was already connected to him. Rune 1, 8, 9, 12, The world exploded into silent shards of ice. Ilara stared at Thorgest, the man who ordered her family's slaughter. The man she showed mercy to, now revealed as her mother's brother. Her uncle. Alfred's face twisted in a silent scream of disbelief. His vengeance suddenly aimed at a ghost more terrible than he imagined. The ghost of his own lineage, his own mother's hidden truth. Thorgest's eyes, fixed on Skari, burned with a sudden, terrifying clarity. The full depth of the manipulation laid bare. Einar watched, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his granite face. The saga had not just revealed its true villain. It had just revealed its true, horrifying bloodline. Seth imagined. Skari's cold eyes lingered on Ilara, the cruel half-smile fixed on his scarred face. Yes, he purred, his voice cutting through the wind, now a low moan around the trees. Kin. Thorgest is the raven, and your mother. She was the forgotten spring from which that blood still flows, though hidden deep. He looked at Alfred, whose face was a mask of disbelief and raw, bleeding rage. Your vengeance, little Saxon, is a child throwing stones at a storm. You rage against the wave, blind to the tide. Rune 1, 9, 12. Alfred choked out a sound, a mix of fury and horror. My mother, she was of Wessex, loyal! Rune 8. Skari laughed, a dry, rustling sound. Loyalty? Blood runs thicker than holy water or Saxon soil, boy. Your mother carried a legacy she herself may not have fully understood. A legacy of the Raven's oldest line. A line bound not just by chieftainship, but by other things. He gestured vaguely, his pale eyes holding Ilara's. Rune 1, 5, 9. The Raven's bloodline, Skari explained, his voice dropping, now a chilling whisper that seemed to slither into their ears. Carries a debt, a pact forged in the deep past, with powers older than Odin or your white Christ. A pact for power, for dominance, paid for in a coin of twisted kinship. Rune 8, 12. Ilara felt a tremor run through her, not from the cold, but from a sudden, icy dread blooming in her gut. Skari's gaze intensified, fixing on her hand, the one that had held the waterskin. That pact requires connection, kinship, acknowledging kinship. Violence against kin is one price, but mercy. He paused, letting the weight settle, his voice becoming sharp as a shard of ice. Kin showing mercy to kin, that fulfills a condition few remember. It binds the blood anew. It awakens what sleeps. Rune 1, 8, 9, 10. The negation of the hope of simple mercy. He tilted his head, his eyes gleaming with morbid satisfaction. Your act of saving the JARL, little Saxon, you didn't just save your uncle's life. You bound yourself to him, not by claim or conquest, but by blood and the ancient pact. You anchored yourself to the Raven. You fulfilled the condition. Rune 1, 8, 12. A sudden, sharp pain lanced through Ilara's veins, like ice shards tracing patterns beneath her skin. Thorgest, beside her, gave a low, guttural groan, clutching his wound, not just in pain, but in sudden, horrified understanding. His eyes met Ilara's, wide with the dawning horror of a shared, Inescapable destiny. Rune 1, 9. Skari watched them, his smirk widening, revealing teeth like small, sharp stones. The raven blood is now truly awakened in you, little branch, he said, his voice laced with triumph. You are tied to the power and the price. By saving him, you did not find freedom. You forged your own chains, and perhaps you forged his destiny too. Rune 8:12. Alfred staggered back slightly on his horse, his eyes darting between Ilara, Thorgest, and Skari. His face contorted in a silent scream. His vengeance, his loss, his mother's memory, all twisted into a sickening mockery by Skari's words. Einar watched, his gray eyes alight with cruel understanding. This was better than simple battle. This was the weaving of fate, tangled and dark. Rune 1:7. The wind howled, carrying the sound of breaking promises and newly forged bonds. Ilara stared at Thorgest, her uncle, her destroyer, now her fated kin, bound by an act of mercy that was, in truth, a devastating curse. The saga had just revealed that saving a life could damn a soul, and the threads of destiny were woven not in hope, but in ancient, terrible blood. Ancient, terrible blood. Ilara stood transfixed, the world narrowed to the horrifying triangle of faces before her. Alfred, her brother, twisted by betrayal. Thorgest, her uncle, her destroyer, now bound by her hand. And Skari, the serpent, his face a mask of chilling amusement. The air, thick with unspoken dread, vibrated with the truth Skari had just unleashed. Her mother, of the raven's blood. Thorgest, her uncle. The words hammered in her skull, shattering the last vestiges of sanity she clung to. Rune 1:9. He rise. He surged forward on his horse, axe gripped tight in his maimed hand, eyes fixed on Skari with a renewed, desperate fury. My mother was a good Christian woman, a Saxon. You weave tales, demon. Rune 8:12. Skari didn't flinch. His gaze remained fixed on Ilara, pale eyes gleaming. He spoke, his voice low, almost sympathetic, a viper's hiss in the wind. Truth is often the hardest blade to swallow, little Saxon. Your mother was many things, but her blood spoke of the North, older than your god, and that blood holds secrets and carries debts. Rune 5:8-9. He paused, and his eyes dropped, not to her face, but to her hand, the one still faintly damp from the waterskin. A shiver, cold and deep, ran through Ilara. Rune 3:4. You wonder why your act of saving the raven bound you so completely? Skari's voice dropped lower still, a conspiratorial whisper. Why it didn't just save a life, but awoke a shared fate. He leaned forward slightly, the chilling half-smile widening. It was not merely the water, little branch. It was the vessel. Rune 5:8-12. Ilara's breath hitched. Her gaze snapped down to her hand, to the small, plain leather waterskin still clutched in her numb fingers. It was old. Her mother had carried it, always. It had been the last thing she took before fleeing the burning village, found tangled near where she'd collapsed. A simple thing. Rune 3:9. Skari's eyes burned into hers, twin points of glacial ice. That skin, he stated, flatly, definitively, is older than your mother's time. passed down through her hidden line, not merely a water skin, but a vessel of the Pact itself, a focus, the blood given from that skin to injured raven kin. He trailed off, the implication hanging heavy in the frigid air. Rune 8:12. A searing pain, sharp and sudden, flared in Alera's hand, shooting up her arm, a mirror to the pain Thorgest had cried out with moments before. It wasn't just cold, it felt like fire and ice twisted together, burning beneath her skin, tracing fiery lines that seemed to converge on the water skin itself. Rune 1:9. You did not just offer mercy, Skari concluded, his voice devoid of warmth, filled instead with grim satisfaction. You completed the ritual. You sealed the bond. By using that vessel, given by raven blood to raven blood in a moment of vulnerability. You didn't just awaken the kin tie, Alara. You activated the debt. You anchored both yourself and him, not just to each other, but to the Pact's ancient, terrible demands. Rune 1:8-9-10. The ultimate negation of hope. The air crackled, thick with a power Alara could suddenly feel, humming deep beneath the frozen ground, echoing the burning pain in her hand. She hadn't just saved her uncle. She hadn't just allied with her destroyer. She had, with an act of desperate mercy using her mother's last possession, become the unwitting key to an ancient pact, binding herself and Thorgest, the raven, to a fate far more horrifying than death. Alfred stared, his face pale under the scars, vengeance forgotten in the face. Skari's eyes, fixed on Ilara's pain-racked face, held the cold triumph of a master weaver completing his darkest tapestry. The saga had just revealed that the greatest threats were not forged in iron, but held in the hollows of a simple, cursed waterskin. Cursed waterskin. Ilara's hand burned, the pain searing a path up her arm, mirroring the silent agony on Thorgest's face. Cursed, not holy water, a vessel of pacts, her mother, of the raven's blood, her uncle, her destroyer, bound by this. Alfred screamed again, a raw, animal sound that ripped through the sudden quiet. Lies! He lies! He spurred his horse, axe raised, not towards Thorgest, but Skari, his face a mask of desperate denial. My mother was a good Christian woman, a Saxon. You weave tales, demon! Skari didn't move. His pale eyes, fixed on Alara, gleamed with cold amusement. Truth, he purred, his voice a low hiss in the wind, is often the hardest blade to swallow, little Saxon. Your mother was many things, but her blood spoke of the North, older than your God, and that blood holds secrets and carries debts. He glanced at the waterskin Alara still clutched. That vessel, it didn't just awaken the tie, Alara. It activated the debt. The Pact demands a price. He paused, and a terrifying change came over his face. The smirk vanished, replaced by an expression of grim reverence, almost fear. His voice dropped to a chilling whisper, just for Alara. The Pact demands souls, little branch. The souls taken by betrayal. The ones offered on the altar of fear. His gaze locked onto her, and Alara felt a deep, sickening cold bloom in her chest. Colder than the marsh. Colder than fear. Then it happened. The air around Alara grew heavy. buzzing with unseen energy. A low sound, like wind moaning through shattered timbers, echoed strangely from within her own bones. Her vision blurred at the edges, and for a terrifying, fleeting second, she saw not her own reflection in Thorgest's wide eyes, but a glimpse of another face, gaunt, smoke-stained, eyes wide with terror. Her mother. A strangled cry tore from Alara's throat, thick with horror. Beside her, Thorgest gave a violent shudder, his wound pulsing with dark fire. His eyes rolled back for a fraction of a second, and the riders recoiled, murmuring, crossing themselves against the evil they sensed. For in that instant, Thorgest was not alone. A second smaller shadow seemed to cling to him, a fleeting image of a child's terrified face, mouth open in a silent scream. Little Mary. Skari watched the horror unfold, his pale eyes gleaming with a terrible satisfaction. They are bound to the power now, he breathed, his voice barely audible above the rising wind. Your mercy, it didn't save him from their vengeance, little Saxon. It anchored their lost souls to you, to both of you. The debt is claimed, the Raven's Pact. It feeds on twisted kinship. Alfred froze, axe dropping slightly, his fury replaced by a gaping, soul-deep terror. Einar's cruel smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of awe and primal fear. This was not merely a squabble over leadership. This was ancient, terrifying magic, awakened by the very people he sought to control. Ilara stood, trembling, bound not just to a man, but to the vengeful ghosts of her own kin, now horrifyingly intertwined with her destroyer and herself. The Saga had just plunged into darkness deeper than any bog, shadowed by the souls of the sacrificed. Cursed waterskin. Ilara's hand burned, the pain searing a path up her arm, mirroring the silent agony on Thorgest's face. Cursed, not holy water, a vessel of pacts, her mother, of the Raven's blood, her uncle, her destroyer, bound by this. Alfred screamed again, a raw, animal sound that ripped through the sudden quiet. Lies! He lies! He spurred his horse, axe raised, not towards Thorgest, but Skari, his face a mask of desperate denial. My mother was a good Christian woman, a Saxon. You weave tales, demon. Skari didn't move. His pale eyes, fixed on Ilara, gleamed with cold amusement. Truth, he purred, his voice a low hiss in the wind, is often the hardest blade to swallow. Little Saxon, your mother was many things, but her blood spoke of the North, older than your god. And that blood holds secrets and carries debts. He glanced at the waterskin Ilara still clutched. That vessel, it didn't just awaken the tie, Ilara. It activated the debt. The pact demands a price. He paused, and a terrifying change came over his face. The smirk vanished, replaced by an expression of grim reverence, almost fear. His voice dropped to a chilling whisper, just for Ilara. The pact demands souls, little branch. The souls taken by betrayal, the ones offered on the altar of fear. His gaze locked onto her, and Ilara felt a deep, sickening cold bloom in her chest, colder than the marsh, colder than fear. Then it happened. The air around Alara grew heavy, buzzing with unseen energy. A low sound, like wind moaning through shattered timbers, echoed strangely from within her own bones. Her vision blurred at the edges, and for a terrifying, fleeting second, she saw not her own reflection in Thorgest's wide eyes, but a glimpse of another face, gaunt, smoke-stained, eyes wide with terror. Her mother. A strangled cry tore from Alara's throat, thick with horror. Beside her, Thorgest gave a violent shudder, his wound pulsing with dark fire. His eyes rolled back for a fraction of a second, and the riders recoiled, murmuring, crossing themselves against the evil they sensed. For in that instant, Thorgest was not alone. A second, smaller shadow seemed to cling to him, a fleeting image of a child's terrified face, mouth open in a silent scream. Little Mary. Skari watched the horror unfold, his pale eyes gleaming with a terrible satisfaction. They are bound to the power now, he breathed. It anchored their lost souls to you, to both of you. The debt is claimed. The Raven's Pact, it feeds on twisted kinship. Alfred froze, axe dropping slightly, his fury replaced by a gaping, soul-deep terror. Einar's cruel smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of awe and primal fear. This was not merely a squabble over leadership. This was ancient, terrifying magic, awakened by the very people he sought to control. Alara stood, trembling, bound not just to a man, but to the vengeful ghosts of her own kin, now horrifyingly intertwined with her destroyer and herself. The Saga had just plunged into darkness deeper than any bog, shadowed by the souls of the sacrificed. The air crackled, thick with a power Alara could suddenly feel, humming deep beneath the frozen ground, echoing the burning pain in her hand. She hadn't just saved her uncle. She hadn't just allied with her destroyer. She had, with an act of desperate mercy, using her mother's last possession, become the unwit. Alfred stared, his face pale under the scars, vengeance forgotten in the face of this cosmic, sickening twist. Einar watched, his cruel smile widening, seeing not just a challenge to his brother, but the unleashing of a power he might now control. Skari's eyes, fixed on Ilara's pain-racked face, held the cold triumph of a master weaver, completing his darkest tapestry. The Saga had just revealed that the greatest threats were not forged in iron, but held in the hollows of a simple, cursed waterskin. Alfred's roar ripped through the silence. Truth is often the hardest blade to swallow, little Saxon. Your mother was many things, but her blood spoke of the North, older than your god. And that blood holds secrets and carries debts. He glanced at the waterskin Alara still clutched. That vessel, it didn't just awaken the tie, Alara. It activated the debt. The Pact demands a price. He paused, and a terrifying change came over his face. The smirk vanished, replaced by an expression of grim reverence, almost fear. His voice dropped to a chilling whisper, just for Alara. The Pact demands souls, little branch. The souls taken by betrayal. The ones offered on the altar of fear. His gaze locked onto her, and Alara felt a deep, sickening cold bloom in her chest, colder than the marsh, colder than fear. Then it happened. The air around Alara grew heavy, buzzing with unseen energy. A low sound, like wind moaning through shattered timbers, echoed strangely from within, her own bones. Her vision blurred at the edges, and for a terrifying, fleeting second, she saw not her own reflection in Thorgest's wide eyes, but a glimpse of another face, gaunt, smoke-stained, eyes wide with terror. Her mother. A strangled cry tore from Alara's throat, thick with horror. Beside her, Thorgest gave a violent shudder, his wound pulsing with dark fire. His eyes rolled back for a fraction of a second, and the riders recoiled, murmuring, crossing themselves against the evil they sensed. For in that instant, Thorgest was not alone. A second, smaller shadow seemed to cling to him, a fleeting image of a child's terrified face. Mouth open, they are bound to the power now, he breathed, his voice barely audible above the rising wind. Your mercy. It didn't save him from their vengeance, little Saxon. It anchored their lost souls to you, to both of you. The debt is claimed. The raven's pact. It feeds on twisted kinship. Alfred froze, axe dropping slightly, his fury replaced by a gaping, soul-deep terror. Einar's cruel smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of awe and primal fear. This was not merely a squabble over leadership. This was ancient, terrifying magic, awakened by the very people he sought to control. Alara stood, trembling, bound not just to a man, but to the vengeful ghosts of her own kin, now horrifyingly intertwined with her destroyer and herself. The Saga had just plunged into darkness deeper than any bog, shadowed by the souls of the sacrificed. The wind whipped Skari's words away, but the chill remained, colder than the frost-hardened earth. Alfred's initial lunge towards Skari faltered. Einar's riders, hardened warriors, shifted nervously, sensing the air wasn't just cold, but wrong, thick with the scent of powers they didn't understand. Einar himself, the ambition in his eyes warring with a primal fear, hesitated. This wasn't the clean blade work he craved. This was the bog rising to claim its own, twisted by ancient blood. Skari, however, felt no fear, only exultation. He raised a hand, pale eyes alight with a dark triumph. The debt is claimed. The betrayer's price is due. His gaze swept from Alfred to Thorgest, then to Alara, his voice ringing with cruel authority. Justice, for the Pact, for the souls. Let the price be paid. In that instant, something shifted. The air screamed. The ghostly forms around Alara and Thorgest intensified, their silent cries filling the space, no longer just spectres of terror, but coalescing, drawn by Skari's command, by the raw, exposed threads of betrayal he had woven. They surged toward Skari, pulled by a horrifying spectral gravity. Skari's triumph twisted into a snarl. He hadn't meant himself. He'd meant Alfred, or Thorgest, weakened. But the Pact, awakened by Alara's kinblood, and Skari's own double betrayal, demanded the architect of the deepest treachery, It demanded him. Alfred, seeing his mother and sister's spectral forms surge towards Skari, finally moved, not in vengeance for his own pain, but in a desperate, final act of protection. He drove his horse forward, not attacking Skari, but placing himself between Skari and the spectral surge. "Mother, Mary, no!" he roared, his scald face contorted in a final futile attempt to shield them from their own fate. But the surge was unstoppable, fueled by a pact older than his faith, older than the raven's raids. It washed over Skari, a wave of icy terror and silent screams. Skari's triumphant cry became a choked gasp, his eyes wide with a horror that finally extinguished their cold gleam. He wasn't killed by steel. He was claimed. His body slumped in the saddle, a husk, his soul drawn into the pact he sought to wield. As Skari fell, the spectral forms around Alara and Thorgest flickered, faded, and were gone. Not consumed, but finally, terrifyingly, released. Their silence now felt like peace. The burning in Alara's hands subsided, leaving only a dull ache and the chill memory. Thorgest sagged beside her, the raw wound in his side throbbing, but the dark fire gone from his eyes. The pact was sated, the debt paid, not by the innocent or the victim, but by the betrayer who thought he controlled the price. Einar watched Skari's horrifying end, a chill entering his gray eyes. This was power, yes, but wild and untamable. He saw Thorgest, still weakened but alive, his eyes locked with Alara's, in a newly forged, terrifying understanding. He saw Alfred, his head bowed, the fury gone, replaced by a hollow grief for the kin he had failed, and who had, in their spectral vengeance, ultimately claimed the true villain. Einar's moment had passed. The raw magic, the terrifying kinship, had thwarted his clean play for power. With a curt nod to his riders, a silent promise of battles yet to come, Einar turned his horse and rode back into the trees, his banners snapping defiance in the wind. Alfred did not look up as Einar left. He looked at Alara. The hatred was gone from his eyes, replaced by an ocean of grief and a terrible shared knowledge. He had found vengeance, but lost everything. He had fought the wrong war, against the wrong enemy, and the true cost was borne by the souls he loved. He turned his horse, silent now, and rode away from the scrub, a ghost walking among the living. Alara watched him go, a single tear tracking down her cheek. Her brother, alive, but lost to her, perhaps forever. She looked at Thorgest, the destroyer, her uncle, her fated kin, bound, not by love or conquest, but by mercy, betrayal, and the bone-deep chill of an ancient power. The Raven's claim on her was not ownership, but shared destiny, a burden they would carry together. The wind settled. The sun, weak but present, broke through the clouds, casting long shadows. The land was quiet, marked by the brief, terrible storm of souls and secrets. The saga of the Raven and the Saxon woman would echo through the ages. Not a tale of simple war or vengeance, but of how blood ran deeper than rivalry, how mercy could forge curses, and how the spirits of the betrayed could find their justice in the most unexpected ways. Alara and Thorgest stood together, Figures against the horizon, forever changed, forever linked. The cost of their survival etched into their very beings. Their journey had ended. Their legend had begun. Se esta saga tocou sua alma, então escute o chamado do Skald. A nossa jornada depende da força do nosso clã, e essa força é você. Você precisa se inscrever agora, para que os deuses do algoritmo não te façam perder nossas próximas lendas exclusivas. Este é o momento de mostrar seu valor. Esmague o botão de like para alimentar nossa fogueira e inunde os comentários com suas reações sobre este final. Suas teorias são o